All those in favor? Oh, roll call. Turnabout's fair play, Randy.
Commissioner Wiedemann? Commissioner Beckler? Yes. Chair Crane?
Aye. All right.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Matters from the public. Airport Land Use Commission welcomes participation in commission meetings. This item is limited to matters under jurisdiction of the commission that are not on the proposed agenda and items which have not already been considered by the commission. No action will be taken. Are there any comments from the public on non-agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move on to 5A. Introduction and presentation from Mead and Hunt Consultant regarding update of the airport comprehensive land use plan.
If I could start out, Chair Brent Schultz, Planning and Building Services Director. I want to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon, and I want to just tell you a little bit about this process. When I got here, it was one of the things that the board was interested in doing was looking at the Ukiah Airport Comprehensive Land Use Plan. And in November, we took forth some directives and priorities to the board. I did, and got direction to come back with options on how to update the comprehensive land use plan for Ukiah Airport. I had been talking with Craig Schlatter, who's I think sitting over there, the Community Development Director for City of Ukiah, about it, and we came up with a process working with County Council and many others, as well as City Council members and over in Ukiah to kind of work together on this plan. It ended in an agreement between the two sides on how to do it. We'd share the costs of preparing or updating the comprehensive land use plan, and Craig got everything done, got him under contract, got Mead and Hunt under contract, and this is the start of that process. I think it's going to take us 5-8 months, hopefully, if we can get through all the things that we have to do. And I just want to let you know, our planner who will be heading this up, be the point person working with Mead and Hunt, will be Keith Cronendike. He's here today, but also Julia and I will be, if he's not here or ill, we'll be backing that up to make sure, because there's a number of documents that we need to help get to facilitate the plan and all the information that you're going to need in the end. And I do want to tell you, because in this schedule and this process, there is going to be at the end of it, before it comes back to you, you'll see drafts of it, and there'll be other meetings to get your input on things. But there will be, that we put in, Matt and I worked out with Craig, there will be a joint planning commission meeting of the final draft. And again, it's not for, they don't make the final determination on approval of this plan. That would be this body. But I want them consulted, so does Craig, so they can see if there's any land use changes that would happen as a result of this plan before they go to you, because they may have, if they're approved by you, they may have to change something in our general plan or zoning. I don't know that. Maybe there's nothing, but we have that process, as well as our Board of Supervisors and City Council. There'll be a joint, and that'll be down the road, again, 5 to 8 months from now probably, that they will get to see it too, and then again the final one will come to you. So I just want to let you know that process, because I didn't see a schedule in here. But if there's any questions as we go, please do not hesitate to call me on the phone. So with that, is there nothing else that you want to add? I just wanted to introduce Miranda Thompson. She's with Mead and Hunt, and I've been told she's heading up this process, and also Kenneth Brody, their senior project managers here, as well as Corbett Smith, and I'll hand it over to them, and you can start the presentation.
Hello, good afternoon, commissioners. Again, Miranda Thompson with Mead and Hunt. I am the designated project manager, and with me are several Mead and Hunt team members, and we'll do introductions shortly. But we're very excited to launch this project, and we understand that some of the commissioners are new. And so as part of our presentation today, we are providing kind of a brief overview of the ALUC statutes, what you may have read in the state guidebook. We sent along 101, ALUC 101 handout to the county, and it may be attached with your packet there. If not, we have extra copies for you. And then we will talk about the specifics of this ALUCP updates and what's involved, talk about the schedule, and then I'm going to hand it off to Corbett Smith, who is leading the background data compilation effort, which includes looking at aeronautical data as well as land use information from the city and county. I do want to open it up by saying that we would like this to be more of a workshop type presentation where you are welcome to stop us and ask questions, and if there's a comment that I will be addressing later in my presentation, I'll just make note of that. But I do want this to be more of a informational meeting and get your inputs as we kind of move along through the presentation. With that, I would like to start out with introductions. Because this is kind of a joint venture here, we're working with the Airport Land Use Commission because this is ultimately the plan that you will be adopting and implementing. In accordance with state law, the ALUC needs to coordinate with the affected local jurisdictions. So in this case, that is the county and the city of Ukiah. So in the introductions, our understanding is that Brent Schultz, as the Planning and Building Services Director, will be representing the county and has designated Julia and Keith as participants in this planning effort. From the city side of the house, we have Craig Schlater with Community Development, and then Greg Owen as the Airport Manager. The consulting team here, Mead and Hunt, Miranda Thompson, with who's going to be the overall project manager, as Ken Brody, who's the senior planner, who I think has been before you in past projects, and then Corbett Smith is working with Greg Owen on the airport elements, airport layout plan, etc. And then we have Shay in the audience who will be supporting our efforts in developing this compatibility plan. And for our team's benefit, we would like to just go around to the commissioners. If you can just give us a little background so we have an understanding of what your perspective is, what your background is. Are you a pilot? That would be very informative for our group. With that, can I start with you, Eric?
Sure. Eric Crane, profession is building and engineering construction, pilot since early 2000s.
Thank you.
Yeah, Leonard Swithenbank, a pilot since '87, retired building contractor from the coast.
Okay. Thank
Greg
you.
Nelson, Mendocino County Planning Commissioner for a long time, local farmer. I'm not a pilot.
Thank you.
Diana Wiedemann, 5th District Planning Commissioner, architect by trade, and I'm here representing, basically we have an airport and 2 little airports in 5th District.
Great, thank you.
I'm Randy Jacobson. I'm an environmental consultant here in Mendocino County.
Randy Beckler, retired from PG&E, supervisor here at the department, and I'm a pilot since 2006.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we are going to launch into the ALUC 101 component. And again, it's just to go through the state statutes, recognizing that there may be commissioners who are new to the process, as well as folks in representing the public. So with that, I would like to just kind of launch into our presentation by starting with the ALUC rules and responsibilities. So this comes forth through the State Aeronautics Act, Public Utilities Code, and the ALUC statutes say that the purpose of the commission is to protect public health and safety. And the way that it does this is by promoting the orderly development of airports and also looking at and advising local agencies in adopting land use measures that will minimize airport conflicts. The responsibilities of the ALUC is, number one, to prepare and adopt an airport land use compatibility plan. It also will be reviewing certain actions by local agencies, such as master plans, zoning variations, and sometimes development proposals. And the ALUC's role here in doing these compatibility reviews is to determine the consistency of these land use actions or airport plans with the policies and criteria included in the compatibility plan. In terms of limitations, the airport authority, or excuse me, the Airport Land Use Commission has no authority over airport operations, which means it cannot dictate where aircraft are flying. It can't prohibit an airport from expanding. What it does when it looks at an airport master plan, for example, is whether or not the airport operator has adequately addressed some of the compatibility concerns like noise and runway protection zones. You know, do they have control within those areas? The ALUC also has no authority over existing land uses, which means if there is a use that does not conform to the Commission's plan, it can't force a change to that development. There's no authority over federal, state, and tribal lands. And in this case, what we typically recommend, or what ALUCs typically do here, is the policies and becomes guidance to these agencies. There's also no direct ability to implement the land use measures, and that's why it's very important to involve the local agencies that have that land use authority for input and guidance into the development of the compatibility plan. In terms of developing an airport land use compatibility plan, which I'll probably just say compatibility plan because it's a mouthful, the function is to promote compatibility between the airport and the land use with adjacent land uses. And the way that's done is by establishing an airport influence area, identifying the appropriate compatibility criteria within the airport influence boundary, and to recommend land use measures for local adoption. State law requires local agencies amend their general plans to be consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan. In terms of developing the compatibility plan, we will be guided by the information included in the Airport Land Use Compatibility Planning Handbook published by Caltrans Division of Aeronautics. It also needs to be based on an approved airport master plan, and if one does not exist or is outdated, then the compatibility plan can be based on an airport layout plan that is accepted by Caltrans Division of Aeronautics to form the basis of the compatibility plan update. The compatibility plan also needs to have a time horizon of at least 20 years, very similar to an airport master plan or a community's general plan. It has a 20-year outlook. The figure at the bottom of the slide just kind of gives you a sense of these three different types of plans and the geographic scope and purpose of those plans. So if you think of an airport master plan, it's dealing with everything operationally within the airport fence. And so it's dealing with on-airport property, it's looking at existing and future uses, the need for upgrading or improving the facilities to accommodate future demand, and it really forms the basis of the compatibility plan. The ALUCP defines the airport influence area. It identifies the policies and criteria to promote airport and land use compatibility. And then the general plan is the community's it guides community land use decisions. And it It establishes the land use patterns within that jurisdiction, and it guides land use development. And so the ALUCP really bridges the two different plans together. It looks at the airport master plan and the community's land use document. As I mentioned, local agency responsibilities. Number one is once the commission adopts the compatibility plan, state law requires that the local jurisdictions amend their plans to be consistent with the new compatibility plan or take action to overrule the commission. And our preference when we do these projects is to seek concurrence, because ultimately what we want is a plan that is implemented and that is protecting the airport to allow it to be a viable facility and accommodate the aviation needs, as well as the community in terms of looking at the compatible development within the airport environs. The compatibility plan addresses 4 factors or concerns. One, it deals with noise contours, and this figure here just shows you kind of the general scope of these 4 compatibility concerns. So noise deals with disruption to human activities such as sleep disturbance, schools in terms of learning and reading comprehension. If there's noise intrusions, then that's a disruption to those types of activities. And what we look to for a metric is the noise contours that are typical as part of a master plan project or just an airport master plan. So as part of this compatibility planning effort, we are generating a set of new noise contours to reflect existing and future activity. And Corbett will get into that detail in his presentation. And the objective here is to avoid new noise-sensitive uses within the airport environs. Second, we look at safety, and this is dealing with risk to people and property on the ground in the event of an aircraft accident. So we're looking here to minimize the density or intensity of development or congregation of people within certain parts of the airport influence area. We also have overflight, which is related to noise, but it deals with more of annoyance. Someone's in the backyard, they're having a family barbecue, and then there's aircraft buzzing overhead. They may be a little bit more, some people may be sensitive to noise, and therefore the idea behind the policies for this compatibility plan is to bring awareness to people who may be working and living or intending to work and live within the airport influence area that an airport exists, and buyer beware. Understand where you're moving to. So buyer awareness and renter awareness of airport proximity is important here. Lastly is airspace protection, which deals with physical, visual, and electronic hazards. And we're really looking at the flying public, making sure that we are protecting their needs and so that they can safely fly in and out of this airport. What we do in terms of the compatibility plan is really look to the airport's airspace plan, which utilizes the Federal Aviation Administration's Part 77 airspace surfaces, and that is used by the FAA to identify potential obstructions to airspace, and we look to that as more of setting the height limits for land use development. So there was a lot of information that I gave you during that ALUC 101. Is there any questions for our group? Any comments?
I was hoping that we could all get a copy of the presentation electronically if possible.
Sure. That would be fine. Let me just write that request.
Any questions from the commission at this time?
Oh, I just had, I don't know if it could be a question. I'll form it as a question. So because drones are becoming, more and more on the public radar, right, as far as commercial use of drones in flights. Is that being addressed too in the plan?
Do you want to take this one? I will say this, it is an emerging issue, and I know there's regulations in terms of how they operate in and around the airport. So we can certainly look into it from a land use perspective. I think that's going to be more of an overflight concern or an airport master planning concern. So there's coordination effort that's required with the airport. From a land use perspective, maybe there's a policy that we could develop. It's because it's an emerging issue, it's not something that we've had to deal with in a compatibility plan as of yet, but it's something I will write down for consideration.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's something we can look into, but it is really more from the aeronautical side, and to that extent, it's something that's more likely to be regulated by the FAA, for example. It's not a land use per se in that it's flying. So I don't know if there is a connection. I think it's a tenuous one, but we'll certainly see if there's any history in that regard.
You're supposed to identify yourself for the record.
Any other questions at this time? Hearing none.
Okay, great. Let's move to why are we updating the compatibility plan? The current compatibility plan is dated 1993, and I know that included some of the other airports within the county, and Ukiah was included in 1996. And since adoption of the compatibility plan, there's been 2 iterations of the state handbook, and the handbook really provides good guidance to the commission in terms of what factors to consider and the types of policies that should be considered for inclusion in the compatibility plan. A lot of people will often point to, and I'll get into this a little bit more shortly, but they often point to the compatibility or the safety criteria and the safety zones in the handbook, which look very different from what is in the current plan, which is dealing with composite zones. And so I think for the purpose of this planning effort, we really do want to look at the new information that's provided and guidance provided by the state in this regard. Also, since then, there's been updates to the airport layout plan, which may require some slight refinements to the compatibility plan. So for those 2 reasons, that's really the premise of the need for updating the compatibility plan that we're aware of. So this is just to give you a sense of the current airport layout plan that has been approved by the FAA. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the requirements by state law is for us to get to circle this through Caltrans to get their acceptance before we start building a compatibility plan off of this particular document. And for consistency, it's also useful to have the most current information available and utilize that as the basis of a compatibility plan. So we will be looking to is it the 2016 ALP Corvette?
I think
Yeah.
it's 15.
Okay, so it was approved in 2015? Okay, thank you. And here's the compatibility zones that we've colored up, and again, I want to emphasize that this is composite zones, which means that each zone addresses all 4 compatibility factors that we discussed earlier: noise, safety, airspace, overflight. And the assumption for this project is that we're going to keep the composite zones. From an implementation standpoint, it's an effective way to communicate the compatibility criteria instead of dealing with each individual factor separately. So that's the way the project is currently scoped. And let me just also come to this map and say that in terms of the naming convention that's used here, we're using A, B, C, and D. And zones A and B have the higher level of potential impacts to adjacent land uses. That's where some of the properties are within a runway protection zones. They could be within the noise contours. There's more stringent airspace or height limits that come into play the closer you are to the ends of the runway. The traffic pattern area is represented here by Zone C. And you can see Zone D is located west of the airport. And the traffic patterns on the east side, because of the high terrain, the hills, the mountain here, flanking the west side of the airport. So it really forces the traffic on the east side of the facility. So that's where it's important for us to really look at development patterns within those areas, particularly along the approach, the extended runway center line along the approach and departure corridors, and then also within the traffic pattern area east of the airport. Just for informational purposes, I referenced the safety zones in the handbook. The blue lines represent the generic safety zones from the handbook for a medium general aviation runway. And per the handbook, it says you can modify those zones based on airport-specific factors. So, for example, the traffic patterns on the east side of the airport, therefore, we may be able to modify the zones located west of the facility. Also, Zone 1 is supposed to represent the runway protection zones. As you can see, it's hard to see in this particular graphic, but over here there are two sets of runway protection zones and only one here. So for the north end, we would look most likely to, we'll have to consider both RPZs, existing and future. Our project approach here is really to be guided by the information and guidance provided in the state handbook. We also want to have input from key stakeholders that namely the city and county, but there could also be other players that we need to, other stakeholders that we should know about that will want to have a voice in the development of this plan. I know the ALUC meetings are open to the public, but if there is a certain group or landowner that we should involve, we would like to know that from the commission and from the city and county as well. Again, the idea is to have a plan that everyone can buy into and implement. And for that reason, we also would like to recommend establishing a technical advisory group. And we identified here ALUC, county, and city. So when we establish a technical advisory groups for this type of project, the technical advisory group really serves two purposes. One, they provide us, the consulting team, with information to base the plan upon. It also allows us to get feedback on any preliminary policies or criteria where we need some decision making before we bring it forward to the public realm during the ALUC meeting. It gives, the feedback is very useful, and I think of this as a working group that's going to help mold the development of and shape the development of this document. So in terms of who would comprise this technical advisory group, we recommend having aviation and land use perspectives to formulate this group. So I talked about the city and county having an airport manager or someone that's familiar with airport operations, and balancing that with someone that has land use development understanding of what the process is, because a lot of the policies and the compatibility plan really deal with the process of project reviews and to work out those details as part of the working group. And we'll come back maybe to getting input from the commission on who might come forward to sit on this advisory group, but for the commission, we would recommend at least two people. Again, with that varying perspectives. The county, we certainly have Brent and Keith and Julia, and it sounds like Keith's going to be our primary liaison. And then we would also invite perhaps someone from the airport or Public Works Department that's oversees the county owned airports. We can invite someone from your group to sit in that capacity. And then we have Greg and Craig from the city. Greg representing the airport and Craig representing this land use department. Any input from?
And from the Public Works side, we'd have Amber Munoz, probably beyond
Amber?
that. Yeah. Brent Schultz, Planning and Building Director.
Okay, thank you.
And take it back to the commission for a moment.
Sure.
I'd like to see 3 people on that body. It's less than a majority for basically an ad hoc. We have a 7-member body, so up to 3 would be permissible. Is there any interest in that, or prefer to do the 2 as suggested?
Can we wait to our next meeting to make that decision?
If it pleases the group.
Through the,
I only say that because I'm looking at how much work is entailed. So, and
maybe let's come back to this, because we're going to be talking about the schedule and then the touch points we have with the technical advisory group, so you can understand the level of commitment to this particular effort. So we can, if it's okay with you, we can table it and we'll come back at the end.
Yeah.
So here's the project schedule. So we received the notice to proceed in February. Here's our first ALUC kickoff meeting. Then the next touch point with the commission won't be until sometime in July. Between this period, we're looking to have at least 3 technical advisory group conference calls. And the timing of this is based on the deliverables. So the first step in this planning process is to prepare the background data, which will serve as the basis of the compatibility plan. So our team will be compiling the aeronautical and land use information, summarizing it, and producing a set of maps that shows you the 4 compatibility factors. We'll also come to the technical advisory group with some recommendations as to what the composite compatibility zones would look like. So the first meeting is simply to check in with the technical advisory group to ask them, number 1, is the information that we have summarized within this background chapter complete and accurate? Are we missing anything? And so we're really looking to, for this particular deliverable, to the city and county representing, the airport operations, and then the land use information for the city and county. So then the second deliverable is doing a policy review. We'll look at the current plan that you have in place, look at the guidance provided in the handbook, and identify any potential gaps. We will also present some recommendations based on our understanding of the process and our expertise in this area based on our experience, of preparing these types of plans for other commissions, and bring forward some recommendations for your consideration. And then we will, once we get some feedback from the technical advisory group, we'll look to see what the implications would be on the adjacent land uses based on the preliminary draft criteria. Then we will come forward, we'll prepare the compatibility plan and bring that to the full commission for their review and comment. So that's ALUC meeting number 2 in July. And once we get your feedback on the draft plan, We would go to the city and county, so Brent mentioned, the coordination with the City County Planning Commission as well as the elected bodies. So that would occur August, September timeframe. Then we'll bring all of these comments back to the commission with our recommended revisions to the compatibility plan and bring that to you in October. Then, I have it slightly.
Got it a little bit ahead of yourself there.
Yeah, I missed a step. Number 2 is talking about the compatibility policy review. So coming forward to you in advance of doing any draft plan, we would get your input on the policy changes that we're recommending. We would also have a very good idea of what the general plan consistency findings would be, and that'll inform the development of the CEQA document. And then we would come back to the commission in October with a draft plan. I'm sorry for getting out of sequence there. And in December, by the end of the year, we're hoping to have an adopted plan. So that's the outline in terms of the various touch points that we have planned for the commission, the city and county bodies, and then the technical advisory group. So you can see, just based on this schedule, the upfront work is really over the next few months. Then it goes, once we've gotten the technical input, we can go into the plan mode, and that's when we're reaching out to the actual commission and city-county bodies. Any comments or thoughts about the schedule?
Do we have any meetings scheduled in the near term? I'm looking at the start date of May and looking at it being early April now for the technical advisory group. Seems like forming that is something that needs to happen fairly shortly.
Right, so that's why input on who is going to sit on the technical advisory group, ideally that decision is made today, so that we can establish that group, start reaching out to them, and scheduling the conference call. And so I think it would behoove, because this is an accelerated project schedule, I think it would behoove the group if we can make that decision on who we should include on the advisory group. Let me pass it over now to Corbett, who will talk about kind of the next steps, the near-term next steps.
Thank you, Miranda. So the first major step, which we actually started this morning with meeting with Greg Owen, is collecting all the data compilation. We started this morning collecting operational information about the airport, the number of based aircraft, the number of annual operations, having that kind of discussion of where aircraft fly. What we'll do with that information is we'll take it back to our office. We'll develop a 20-year forecast, develop a picture of what the airport will look like in 20 years from an aviation activity perspective, and then we will develop noise contours out of those assumptions. Those noise contours will play a role, as Miranda explained, in developing this land use compatibility plan. We'll also be taking the airport layout plan as was adopted by the city a few years ago and submitting it to Caltrans for their acceptance as the basis of this land use compatibility plan. And then we'll be compiling all of the land use information from both the city and the county. We want to get a good understanding of what's in those current plans now, and so that we can start to understand where and if there are any potential conflicts between aviation activity and those planned land uses. We'll compile all of that information into a background chapter. We'll have a narrative part of that chapter, as well as tables of all the information and graphics for the noise contours and flight tracks, and that's what we'll present to the technical advisory group for a discussion on a conference call. With the tag as concurrence, then we will move forward with that background information to develop the rest of the land use compatibility plan. And with that, I think we'll just open it up to general questions and conversation. the
Ken Brody,
commission.
I'd like to just add one quick thing that we're realizing today is that the city is just getting underway with its general plan update process. So that's actually going to be advantageous that the two efforts can kind of dovetail with each other and ultimately simplify the end results in both cases. So that's good.
What was the date on the current ALP?
I wanna
For the
say
benefit of the-
2015.
And it's a 5-year cycle. Is
The
that right?
ALP isn't necessarily on a fixed cycle. It's when there's a project upcoming in the airport's capital improvement timeline that the FAA wants to see a more laid out plan for. What triggered that ALP was a runway reconstruction, which is in engineering process now. And the FAA wanted to see an updated ALP in order to issue a grant for that runway rehabilitation. So there isn't necessarily a fixed year as to when that would next be.
And in your discussion, were there any items that look like they would be triggering an ALP update in the near term?
No, there's a few long-term items on that 2015 ALP that we'll want to consider in this land use compatibility plan, but I don't see anything that would trigger another ALP between.
Thank you.
I think it's important to say that the ALP has that 20-year time horizon, but there's these 5-year increments that where it's prudent to review what's there and provide additional detail as the airport moves forward with specific development projects. But it's supposed to represent a 20-year time frame, and that it sounds like when the prior master plan was done, there's only been some refinements to the ALP, which is common.
The other thing, probably, I would suspect that after the upcoming construction project takes place, there would be some update to the ALP just to reflect what's been built, but it wouldn't contain anything new, and that's fairly typical. It doesn't go through the same level of FAA review at that stage because you're just reflecting what's been built as opposed to proposing something different.
Excuse me, do you foresee a problem trying to be in compliance with the general plan as they're working on the general plan and you're working on this at the same time? We'd like to keep the schedule that we have here.
Very good comment, and our plans are independent of the city's general plan update, but what we envision is as our plan moves forward, that there's information that can be given to the county and city to inform them as they move forward with their own planning efforts, namely the city's general plan update. So ideally, because as I mentioned, the state law says that the local agencies need to amend their general plans to be consistent with the compatibility plan or take actions to overrule. And obviously we want to avoid the overrule process altogether. So as part of developing or preparing the CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act documentation effort, we do that general plan consistency effort to help facilitate local agencies, namely the city and county, to amend their plans. So it's just a little bit more efficient and effective to get those processes in place as part of our plan update. But it's not, their schedule is not going to drive the LEC's plan schedule.
Thank you.
I had just kind of an overview question. The county's major airport, clearly Ukiah, and I understand that is like a real focus of this committee and your work. Mm-hmm. But what's the interface for the smaller airports? Because they're going to be tied into these plans too. Am I not? And can you clarify that?
Sure, great question. So the current plan, the 93-96 plan,
Mm-hmm.
addresses all 5 public use airports within the county. Only Ukiah is being updated.
Okay.
But what I can envision is that following this planning effort, it may drive the need or desire to update the plan for the other airports within the county, particularly when it deals with the procedural policies, and each plan is unique to each airport based on the level of operations, et cetera. But the procedural policies may be applicable to all of the airports in the county, because it's really setting the stage for how the commission's going to review projects, and to work from two plans can be difficult.
And then, Chair, if I could address that question
Yes,
as well. Commissioner, we don't have the resources to do all the airports right now. We want to do all the airports, and we're always looking for grants. You know, the Department of Aeronautics has some, and my desire is that, you know, we get Ukiah done, and then we start trying to get grants for the other ones. I like to see them all updated. There's a lot more pressure, a lot more things happening over Ukiah. We need to get that done. We agree with City of Ukiah. It's old, and we need to look at it and compare it to this new way you master plan these airports in the handbook. So, but we will look for resources to address those as well.
My question wasn't so much to really do a thorough review of the other airports at this date. I just wanted to understand the plan that Ukiah we come up with, so to speak, that how it dovetails, or is there going to be a dovetail at some point? And I think you answered my question, and it wasn't about pressure for any other studies at this point.
Yeah, just to clarify though,
Yeah.
it is an independent plan. So any project proposals or any land use actions or airport actions within the airport influence area that this plan's going to define, all of the reviews, all of the ALUC's determination is based on that
Right.
distinct plan.
Thank you.
So we're not talking about a complete overhaul. We're talking about tweaking Ukiah and some of the language.
Think of a complete overhaul for Ukiah.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
So.
That's good.
So it's gonna be a standalone document. I mean, it's here's one for Truckee Tahoe Airport, and you know, it's so when there's something that comes before you that's dealing with Ukiah Municipal Airport, you're going to be looking at one document to refer to in terms of the policies, the criteria, the zones. It's going to be in that
And-
one document. You're not going to be going back to the 93 plan.
And that's going to be for all of the Ukiah Airport, not just the City of Ukiah portion of it.
Correct. So we're dealing with all of the local agencies within the Ukiah Airport, Municipal Airport influence area. So that's city and county as well as special districts.
Very good.
Any other questions or comments?
No, that was very helpful. It kind of defines a certain amount of, from where I sit, a workload.
A lot, I think. So, do we want to put together the advisory component from this body?
I think you should.
So I don't have any names for you, but I was just thinking that, you know, we've got the carpet company, and I think there's a hydroponics company, and then the tractor company. I don't know if it goes out as far as UPS, but it seems like we should have some sort of business representation in that group. Again, I don't know the players.
Well, I meant from this body. Putting
from this
together
body.
putting together our who we're going to field.
I can bow out. I'm feeling rather new here. So I think somebody with some experience would be much more helpful than I would.
It'd be good to have somebody from the County Planning Commission on the advisory, just because that's going to help with the dovetailing and a little bit of transfer of knowledge. Regardless of experience, this is how you get experience, I think.
Well, I would think it's helpful from someone from the commission who lives in Ukiah, you know, or near Ukiah, because since that was one of my questions, if it's the broader scope of work for the county airports, then, but, so.
No, I'm not available for that position right now. I'm on the planning commission, and I'm working, and I have a, you know, a growing business, so I'm just not, I won't be able to help you here.
All right, well, that's one way to put it together. We just bow out. Who's going to race to?
Yeah, well, I agree. If the people that are local here, it'd be
Yeah.
more.
I'm happy to serve if it pleases the commission.
The, the planning commissioner who was from Ukiah District, who's not on this, would she be willing to, since you don't have the timeline?
Right.
You know, and I only know because I think it was the supervisor contacted my supervisor saying, why isn't my planning commissioner on on this committee? Right.
Speaking of Madeline Holtkamp?
Yep. It was,
Yeah, she did.
because there should be a you know, it really makes sense.
She's the second district appointee, or she's the second district planning commissioner, is that right?
From Ukiah.
From Ukiah. And she was on, wasn't she on the
Yeah.
airport? And I think you two added to took, you didn't take a seat, but both of you coming in.
Actually, just for a point of clarification, we have 6 seated here, and it's a 7-member body.
Who's not here?
Who's not here? Do we have that seat filled, or do we have a vacancy?
Dawn, is it Dawn Albright?
Oh, Dawn's not here, that's right. Okay.
But I do think, and I know, the supervisor from Ukiah, what's his name?
McCowan.
McGowan. He had some concerns about that. And I understand why in that representation.
Okay.
So,
Through the chair,
Yes.
Deputy County Counsel Matthew Kudrowski. What we're looking at here, whether or not the committee wants to see if Ms. Holtkamp would be willing to, assist the ALUC in this process is one question. For the moment, we're looking at essentially appointing an ad hoc
Yeah.
between 2 to 3 people from this body. So I don't think Commissioner Holtkamp from the Planning Commission
Yeah, that's
could
not-
serve that role in this regard. So I think if you're looking for 2 people here who'd be willing to
2
serve.
or 3.
Or 3. Right now, 2 seems like
It seems like a
reaching.
strong, yeah.
So,
Can I interject here in terms of the time commitment? There, as I mentioned, there's 3 conference calls scheduled. Each paper might be 5 pages with a series of maps. So the commitment level, there's probably going to be an hour conference call, so 3 total, spread across the next several months, and it's really an opportunity to kind of understand how we're developing the plan before the commission actually has to do the formal ALU review of the complete document. So it would benefit, I think, the commission if we can get at least 2 representatives to participate in the technical advisory group. And those 2 representatives can keep the other commissioners, abreast of our progress during your commission meetings.
Well, and our commission meetings are as needed, so we may not have a meeting for 6 months.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of chance to touch base, which is part of why I'm concerned and would like to see more bodies involved.
I also think that having the aviation perspective is critical here, and also someone with a good understanding of the land use planning process. So someone from the Planning Commission would be ideal to sit in this group. And I don't think you need to be located within the Ukiah area to be able to inform the team, because you're providing a different perspective to the whole plan development, and I really don't think that there's going to be all that much time commitment up front other than the 3 hours and maybe an additional hour to review our materials. But most of the information will be relayed during our conference call to solicit some feedback. And we try to minimize the amount of work that you all have to do. It's really just to keep you guys informed as we start developing the plan and really looking for some direction as to, you know, are we on the right track? Do we need to include others in the discussions? To the point about the stakeholders and including other businesses, I would not advise that they be part of the advisory group. I want this to be more of a technical group, and the other stakeholders could be, we could coordinate with them at an appropriate juncture of our planning effort, and we could do a separate meeting with those individuals or groups.
And we'll also have the county and,
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
yeah,
Be the third person.
yeah. And we'll have county and city staff planners as well to help us with a lot of that aspect of the local perspective.
So we have volunteers of Crane, Beckler, and Nelson. Is that something we should vote on?
Through the chair, I could recommend a motion and a vote, please.
Entertain a motion for an ad hoc of Beckler, Nelson, and Crane.
I so move.
We hear a second?
I second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Swithenbank?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiedemann? Yes. Chair Crane?
Yes.
Commissioner Jacobson?
Yes.
And Commissioner Beckler?
Yes.
Anything else pressing on this item, or you got some more?
That's it. Thank you for your time, and we're very excited to launch this project with you, and we look forward to coordinating and working with the commission as a whole, but also with the technical advisory group. So we will be reaching out. We are working through Craig, so he'll be helping us, you know, get your contact information, and most of the communication will be from either me or from Craig at this point.
Chair Brent Schultz.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing that I want to bring up, that the Technical Advisory Committee will also have its resources. We have Johnson Aviation. I brought them in under a small contract to advise us as you go. This is a little atypical process. Typically, you would see a county and their, or a city and their commission would do it themselves. They would do an RFP, hire this consultant, and do this process. So it's a little different, and I just want to have somebody that we could all talk to as we're looking at the plan. Not to be confrontational, but just some expertise. And this entity I worked with in the past in my previous job, they're reputable. They do these kind of plans, and it's just for limited review or technical questions as we go. So,
And can we get access to that phone number and contact information?
Debbie through me. Yeah, just call me.
It'd be helpful to have them at hand for the tag.
So, you know, it's just since we haven't done one of these, I don't know, since 95 or 3, I just wanted to have somebody we could talk to. So,
Thank you. We're done with 5A, I think. Matters from staff.
Chair, what's that? Oh, we have approval of minutes from December 6, 2018.
I so move.
Move the acceptance of the minutes. That's a motion for accepting the minutes?
Yes.
We hear a second? You can still second.
There's only be 2 of us who'll be voting.
Yeah,
So
typically.
through the chair, Deputy
Yeah.
County Counsel, the most recent version of Brown Act, or not Brown Act, the Roberts Rules does, you are not required to have been at that meeting to vote on those minutes. What you're doing is voting on whether those minutes are accurate. So if there's statements by those who were there at the meeting, if they have any questions or concerns, raise them. If not, there's no prohibition on voting on those minutes.
And it would be hard to get. We need you to vote. Roll call.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Beckler?
Yes.
Commissioner Jacobson?
Yes.
Commissioner Swithenbank? Commissioner Wiedemann? Chair Crane?
Aye. Matters from the commission. I'd like to invite anybody who's interested in taking a tour of the airport, make arrangements so perhaps our airport manager might be willing to conduct a tour, or I'd like, be willing to be there and answer any questions about the operation of the facility, or familiarize you with the facility and aviation in general. So I'd like to extend that invitation.
So my question is, you're not readily accessible as far as timing. Can we do it? Do you want to do it today? To go, you see the airport?
As long as we're less than a quorum, or less than 4 total.
Well, I think there's 3 new ones.
Well, but if I'm there, unless you guys, Greg, could you do a tour?
Okay, yeah. I'd like to do it.
As soon as we're done here, let's
Yeah.
go see.
Yeah.
Looks like
So
we're going
Deputy
to.
County
I'll
Council,
just go back to work and
to
you guys have fun.
to confirm, we cannot do that as more than 3 people at a time.
That's why I'm not going to.
Correct. No, I was just making sure. I heard more yeses coming on board there.
Yeah, I did
So
the math
if
on
it-
the fly. And
If there is some kind of a, there cannot be a quorum, that would be we have to notice that as a public meeting and a site visit.
I'll do it another time.
Okay.
I'm going to do it another time because I have other
Okay.
business here.
well, let me give you my contact
Yes,
information.
And you
Yeah, I
all,
want to do it, yeah.
I will get that from you, and thank you very
Okay.
much.
Then I won't go back to work.
There you go. And thank you very much. That was a great presentation.
Yes, thank you. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Ray, are these on when the lights on?